meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. In the Victorian era, all sorts of people from many walks of life created their makes of cars. A rich nobleman like Count de Dion might simply throw money at someone and tell them to make a car company. Sometimes a professional engineer, such as Carl Benz, with his degree in hand, would get one going. Folks from the trades that had an apprenticeship in manufacturing of some sort, for example, Henry Leland, would jump in. Or perhaps a businessman that wasn't an engineer but knew how to build companies and so ran his company with engineers he hired, like folks like Alexander Duroc. And yet there were those that had no schooling, apprenticeship, training, money, or keen business mind. Rather, they were engineering prodigies that, through raw, incredible ability and determination, went on to create legendary cars. So let's chat about one of those folks, Thomas Humber. He was born in 1841 to a family of modest means in Sheffield, England. His father was a tailor and moved his family to Nottingham when he was 8 years old. Nottingham of the time was quite an industrial center, and young Thomas found work in a small factory in 1854. In a somewhat Dickens-esque manner, he was employed by a Mr. Cross, a blacksmith and wheelwright, as a shop boy, running errands, cleaning, shoveling coal, that sort of stuff. However, young Tommy was a very keen observer, and as opportunities arose, he would try his hand at the tools of the trade. Within a year, he had taught himself the basics of blacksmithing and set to find a job as an actual blacksmith. He left Nottingham and was hired by a very large concern, the Butterley Iron Company. This company was a major player in England, making massive steam engines, locomotives, and even ironclad ship components for the Royal Navy. It did not take long for his supervisors to recognize just how quick to learn he was, as well as the high quality of the work he did. For the next several years, Humber worked for Butterley, growing his career and experience. He left Butterley in 1862 as he felt he'd learned all he was going to there and, despite the protests and begging of his employer, went to find other companies in associated fields that he could try his hand at. For the next 4 years or so, he would go on from company to company, for about a year each time, learning about machining, engineering, and other aspects of manufacturing. He returned to Nottingham in 1866. He quickly found work with Campion's Sewing Machine Company as their chief blacksmith. At about the same time, he set up his own smithy in a shed behind his house and began to do some tinkering. In 1867, Mr. Campion went to Paris and, while there, bought a Michaud velocipede, a very early bicycle. He took it home and asked Thomas to make 6 of them. However, Thomas was not impressed with the design and believed that pedaling should motivate the rear wheel and not the front, so he made some changes. Although not a true safety bike as we know them now, his bike was the first to be rear-wheel drive. After making those 6, he went into business himself, out of his backyard shed as a bicycle maker in 1868. His attention to detail in his manufacturing process made his bikes very well built and became very popular. Within a couple of years, he expanded his company, moved to a proper facility, and added another model to his lineup, the penny farthing. His reputation for making quality bikes grew, and by 1875, he was a player in the English cycling world. For over a decade, his company grew as he added business partners, moved to larger facilities, and expanded his production line. In the process, he became quite a wealthy man and highly respected in the community. He retired from his bicycle company in 1892, rumors being that it was due to squabbles with his partners. However, he had started another company with other partners in 1887, Humber Limited. This company would also make bicycles, but would become the Humber that made motorcycles and cars. It came about in 1896. Harry Lawson, of course, knew Thomas Humber, since they were both kingpins in England's bicycle industry. Harry asked Thomas to build some motorcycles for him using the Pennington engine. A partnership ensued, and the first Penningtons were actually Humber bikes with his non-working engine. Humber, of course, knew that this engine was junk, but a deal's a deal. Next, he built four-wheel cycle cars under British Motor Syndicate. Humber's involvement lasted in the syndicate until 1900, when the partnership was dissolved and Humber Limited could start making vehicles that actually worked. Humber began to make true cars in 1901, creating their first definitive model in 1903. The Humberette, as the model was called, had a 5-horsepower single-cylinder engine, cone clutch, 2-speed gearbox, and could cruise at up to 25 miles an hour. Its rack and pinion steering was controlled by a steering wheel which had a single spoke which attached it to the column. It remained in production until 1908, and thousands of them were built. The Humber Company would continue into the 1970s and build some excellent cars. Thomas himself passed away in 1910, but he did live long enough to see the Humber car become quite popular in England and beyond. We, of course, have more to talk about regarding the exploits of Humber Limited in the future. But Thomas Humber, son of a tailor, no formal education, no apprenticeship, and not a natural businessman, was nonetheless among those pioneers that created successful and profitable makes of vintage cars. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.